Hello, you're listening to Two Old Choughs, a tale of two hospices, the podcast from Cornwall Hospice Care. I'm one of the presenters, Tamsin Thomas, and my other presenter, Gina Starnes, isn't here today, so I'm flying on one wing, as they say. But I am joined by lots of guests, so I'm not totally alone. And this podcast, I've ummed and ahed about how to introduce it, and in the end it boils down to bereavement versus Christmas and New Year. I think that's how best I can put it at this stage, because there's lots of us getting excited and winding ourselves up to the Christmas period, but we know that there are lots of people who are dreading this time of year. So we want to talk through ways in which you can cope or things that might help you through the festive period. And I'm joined by three guests: Marie Brooks, who's our counsellor at St Julia's Hospice, Ange Bunt, who's our counsellor at Mount Edgecombe Hospice, and Clare Bray, who represents our listening ear service. Hello to you all.
Hello.
Let's just quickly start by reminding people what it is that you do. What does it mean, Marie, to be a counsellor?
Well, being a counsellor, Ange and I are both qualified, and our work is mainly working with patients and their families within the hospice, friends as well. We also see bereaved family members, post-bereaved family members, for one-to-one sessions. And I believe you support them as well, Claire?
We do, yes, with the community services. We do various different forms of bereavement support, but listening ear, particularly you mentioned at the beginning, Tamsin, is our telephone support service. So we can support people over the phone for 6 calls.
And interestingly, yours, Claire, is post-bereavement, is that right?
Yes.
Whereas, Ange, what you're doing sometimes is talking to people before they're bereaved.
Pre-bereavement, yeah, and post-bereavement. And I will just say quickly while I'm thinking about it that if there is anybody out there who's lost somebody in the hospice, we don't tend to put a time limit on when they can ring in if they want to speak to Marie or I. I had one lady that rang up 4.5 years later, and so I spoke to her, and it helped her a lot. So if there is anybody thinking I can't because it's too long, don't think that way.
And I think also we're going to hear about some other services like Walk, Talk, Kerno, Claire.
Yes, yeah, our walking groups that we do, which are lovely because it's that whole feeling of being out in nature, but it's peer support as well. People just walking side by side, perhaps that is a nicer way for people than perhaps sitting across and looking at somebody. So we do lots of peer support, bereavement support too, which is very popular.
Now, I said that I felt this really boiled down to bereavement versus Christmas and New Year. I didn't look at your faces. I don't know if you were horrified by that idea or you thought, no, that's it. Is this a tricky time of year that we're approaching for people who are bereaved or maybe going to be bereaved?
Well, my thoughts are yes. I think Christmas is a particularly evocative time and it starts so early in the year now. It can make it very difficult for people that are newly bereaved or facing a bereavement between now and Christmas and just beyond, and sometimes even people that are post-bereaved for many years. It brings up a lot of feelings around that time.
And I think also if they've lost other people, they all come back as well as the one that they've just lost, the person they've just lost. So it can be compounded as well at Christmas, that there's people missing. But I think if you do something to honour them, is how I always put it. I try and honour the people that I've lost at Christmas. I have specific things that I put on the tree that remind me of them. and sometimes it brings a smile to my face. I mean, an example of that is that, I don't know if I'm allowed to say a name, am I? But it's M&S's Christmas advert has Dawn French in it, who was my brother's favourite actress, and they've got a fairy that looks like Dawn French, and I've now got that to put on my Christmas tree, and he would laugh at that. He would think that was amazing. So I think it's about honouring them, and if it's somebody you've lost that loved Christmas, try and involve them in it a little bit somehow. I think that's quite a good idea, really.
And are you hearing it on the phone as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that strikes me, obviously you have people who might be alone at Christmas because they have no family around them and they've lost their significant other. So for them, Christmas is really hard because they are alone. But also some people we hear who are not alone because they have a big family, but they still feel very lonely. And sometimes choose to take themselves out of that family mix and stay at home because perhaps they don't want to bring the mood down, or they just don't feel like they can be around everyone else having a happy Christmas maybe.
I think now might be a good moment then for us to listen to Becky. Now Becky, Marie, you were working with Becky. Mm-hmm. Becky's husband died 5 years ago, so let's have a listen.
I remember vividly after Julian died going to a bereavement support group and talking to a lady, and even then I remember thinking, it stuck in my mind. I remember, and she was chatting about the loss of her husband, and she said, oh well, that was 5 years ago, and well, I've decided now I'm going to get a new job, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and this has happened, and I've got a new partner, but it's still so hard. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, 5 years, and you're just thinking, oh, you're feeling like coming out of your shell. And at that point, I suppose that was about 4 months after Julian had died, and it sounds weird, I was feeling very strong in a way. I was feeling very, well, this is okay. I can do this. I'm still mum. I'm still, I've got the kids, I've got my work, I've got everything. It's been horrendous. But I think I was still in a phase of almost relief, which is hard to put your finger on. But I mean, my husband had been very ill. So we'd had years of just awful times, and so I was in a bit of a, gosh, well, I can sleep, and I can go walk the dog, and I can do things. And so now I find it really interesting that I'm 5 years on, and I do remember again another friend saying to me, oh, it gets harder. I remember thinking, oh, don't be telling me it gets harder. It can't possibly be any harder than what I've been through. But at the same time, it can get harder as well as get easier. And it's the weirdest. I don't think you can have empathy and you can have compassion and you can think you know what it's like, but you don't know what it's like until you go through it. So, yeah. It's incredible. To me, it's like yesterday. At the same time, it seems impossible that it isn't longer than that. It's a really weird thing.
Can you remember how you felt then when you faced your first Christmas and New Year, when all the festivities and everybody's getting excited, but you were on this very difficult journey?
Yeah, I can remember at the time, because I just wanted to be normal. I wanted everything to be normal. I had enough of life being on hold, and I just wanted everything to be normal. And I think actually the first Christmas, I don't really remember. We never did an awful lot for New Year anyway, but the first Christmas, we as a family and the extended family, I think we were so mindful of it being difficult that it wasn't difficult. We were all so determined. For Julian, we were going to have a fantastic Christmas. We were going to do this, we were going to do that. and we had dinner together, and yes, we changed things a bit because, you know, family circumstances had changed. And like Julian used to, he always liked to arrange some sort of entertainment for after Christmas dinner. So one of my sons decided that was his new job, you know, without being asked. He bought loads of stuff and had us all doing various, you know, games and things after Christmas dinner. So the first Christmas wasn't so bad. For me anyway, I think because we were so determined and we were so mindful of each other and just wanted to be together, and we weren't expecting it to be easy. I think that's the thing. We weren't expecting it to be easy. And then, of course, we've had several years, we had 2 COVID Christmases following that where we weren't able to get together, which was really hard. And then I suppose it would have been the 4th, I can't think, but certainly last Christmas, I probably found that one of the hardest yet, because there was, you know, a dawning that, oh my gosh, this is, he's just not here and he's not coming back. And I think as well, in the wider world, although you never stop thinking about it, and every day you still miss that person, you talk to them, think about them, the world has moved on. And your first Christmas, or first 2 Christmases even, people are like, are you okay? Or would you like to do this? Or or this must be hard. By the time it's your 5th Christmas, in a way, it's a bit, nobody even really thinks about it. So, and it's not horrible in being horrible. It's just, you know, life's moved on.
So have you got tactics? Did you find ways, or have you, in these following years, found ways of approaching it?
Yes, and I think, you know, as there's more, we've got more little people in the family. My brother-in-law, they've had 2 little girls since Julian died. So we've trying to change the dynamic. We're not even trying to change the dynamic. The dynamics have changed, and we've started doing some different things, like going off to Tahiti Woods and doing the Christmas things, like before Christmas. Because, of course, alongside that, you've got other changes in... When Julian died, my younger 2 was still at school. So it was still all Christmas concerts and all that sort of thing. Whereas that's gone as well. So your rhythm changes, even without that person. Other things change as well, which isn't always very nice. You don't necessarily like. But I said to my sister-in-law this week, oh, we should book that. We'll do that. So trying to create new things that we do. And we used to do Christmas dinner, and then we used to also do a big family Christmas evening as well. And last year, I think perhaps, well, since that first Christmas, we haven't done that. We've done the day thing, and people have done things separately. But actually, that's been okay, because it's been more relaxing. It never was relaxing, and now it's quite relaxing. And on Boxing Day, because we'd all seen each other, spent so much time with each other on Christmas Day, we wouldn't do anything Boxing Day. Whereas now we go meet up to all go for a walk or something like that on Boxing Day. So it's definitely about new traditions and, you know, new ways of doing things as well.
And how have the people around you been able to help, or is there any advice that you would give to the people surrounding someone who's bereaved at the festive time of year?
I think sometimes you have to be patient, because you can't always control your emotions, and it doesn't always come out in just feeling sad. Sometimes it comes out in being grumpy or just miserable. And I don't mean sad keeping yourself to yourself, but, you know, gloomy. and I think, you know, we have to humour each other and have tolerance for things like that sometimes. But just be kind to each other, really. I think it's the only advice I can say. And as well as that is, and I'm not always very good at that, is sometimes by saying, do you know what, I'm really sad today. I'm really missing your dad, or I'm really, and sometimes you don't say that until you might have had a bit of a meltdown. But sometimes just to say, oh, I'm really sad about this today, or, I can't believe this, or whatever. It's quite empowering, because it then makes it changes the dynamic. People are a bit like, oh, yeah, we'll just cut you some slack. I find that with friends as well, some friends more than others. Some friends just intuitively pick up on something's not quite right, but don't push it. And other friends will be, oh, are you okay? When really you just want to be left quiet. And sometimes I've even, before last Christmas, with one particular friend who was only out of love and kindness trying to support me, but I just had to write them a little note and say, just, would you mind if we just give me a bit of space? Because I'm fine, and I know I'll be fine, but I just don't need to talk about it. Because sometimes it helps to talk about it, and sometimes it really doesn't help to talk about it. Sometimes you just want to be on your own, in a room, sitting.
And I think sometimes if you're not the bereaved person, your own fears come to the fore. So maybe you might assume that someone would find Christmas difficult. I love Christmas. I absolutely adore it. And I think my assumption would be that if you had been bereaved, you were dreading it. When maybe not. Maybe we're stamping our thoughts onto the other person.
I think so, and I often do. I mean, I have to say, you make me smile there, because it's very true. I actually can be like that. And it's not that I dislike Christmas, and I love everybody coming together, but it can feel overwhelming, the thought of another. And what I often find, it's the same with birthdays or anniversaries of the day, my husband died, or any of these big things. They can build up as mountains in your head before the event. When the actual day comes, I'm always fine. But the build up to it sometimes can just be exhausting, I think.
I think that's very interesting as well. We're all individuals, aren't we?
Yes.
So we're all going to deal with things in different ways. But that I like that feeling of honesty. Be honest with the people around you. If Christmas is getting you down or whatever, it's best to say it out loud.
Yeah, definitely. Because as well as that, sometimes when you say it out loud, you think, oh, that's just ridiculous. Just, really, what a whim. We none of us like to get out of our comfort zone, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes you just wish you'd stayed at home.
Big thanks to Becky. It's not easy when someone approaches you and says, could I record you for a podcast? Oh, and it's about bereavement. But she was very open and honest. I watched the three of you out of the corner of my eye. You were nodding quite a bit during that. There's a lot to take in there. But initial thoughts from you about what Becky had to say?
I think sometimes it is a good idea to kind of make different traditions, and perhaps go to a place where the person you lost, you have no memories of them there, because that can help a lot, as well as going to the places obviously that you love together. So I think making sort of new traditions is a good one.
And that whole area too of it might not be the first year. I thought that was very interesting. It hit Becky in year 4 or something like that, Marie.
Yes, yeah. The people that have died, they're irreplaceable people, and I think that feeling can intensify. I think as well, grief is not the enemy to that. It's something that really should be embraced and allow yourself to be immersed in that. Because I think it gives you time to revisit what that person meant to you and continues to mean to you.
I thought it was also very interesting about this needing to be honest, if you possibly can, with people. That really sort of caught my attention.
Yeah, it did me as well. I think that's nice to be able to say, today is a bit of a bad day. Today, like she said, before the meltdown, preferably, just so that people kind of know where you are and that it's okay that that's happening. I think somebody said to me the other day, we hear the phrase "it's okay to not be okay," which I think is a really good one to have. But it's okay to be okay too, and I think it's having that balance, isn't it? But being able to be honest about it.
And I do feel for the people who are around the bereaved person. If they haven't been bereaved, that's got to be a tricky area too, hasn't it?
It is very tricky for people, and they don't know what to say. And quite often people will say to me, "What do I say?" Because I don't know what to say. And I'll say to them, just say that. I don't know what to say, but I'm here to listen. And also, where that lady was concerned, I think if she can cry, if she can say, "I'm having a day where I'm feeling upset," it then gives permission for the children to feel that it's okay to cry. And you don't have to hide it. That's the thing. I think that can be helpful.
Yes, it was interesting. She talked about being grumpy, not necessarily sad, but off key, which was an interesting concept, I thought.
Something that I've heard on a number of occasions is where friends or family members try and involve the person bereaved into festivities or doing lovely things to try and forget what's happening, when quite often the person who's bereaved only wants to be left alone to process that grief. And I think that's really important, that if they want that first year to be on their own, yes, friends could support in whatever way they're able, but we can't change the fact that it has happened.
It's always a dread of mine, because I'm a very extrovert person and the glass is always half full for me, that I would be overcompensating and I'd be over jolly about Christmas. Yippee, come on, and trying to rally everyone round and lift everyone's spirits. And I kept thinking about that while Becky was talking and thinking, I'm probably everyone's worst nightmare if you want to be like Becky and have a moment. And that I can't be the only one that feels like that, surely.
No, I think it's a natural response, isn't it? If somebody's sad, you want to make them happy. You want to make everything okay. And I think that's a very human reaction to have.
And isn't it good that we're saying this out loud? Because actually this podcast isn't just for someone who's bereaved. I think it's for everybody who might be around someone who's bereaved, or even someone who might be bereaved in the future. It's an unknown, isn't it?
It is. It is an unknown.
And sometimes people need that little bit of time to themselves, and I think it's fine to say, will you just excuse me for a while? I'm just going to take a step outside or whatever. Just to have a little think about things and just to have a little bit of time on their own before they rejoin whatever's going on for them then.
You're listening to Two Old Choughs, a tale of two hospices, the podcast from Cornwall Hospice Care. I have another person who I think very bravely spoke about bereavement. I've said this already in this podcast, actually approaching someone saying, could I record you? And by the way, it's about this subject of bereavement. Darren was as willing as Becky to share some thoughts, which was extraordinary because Darren's dad only died a year ago. But I thought we could just sit and listen to what he had to say as we talked about this subject of bereavement, particularly over the festive period.
Last year, I lost my dad at the age of 86. In fact, one day before his 87th birthday. He had a cancer diagnosis only 5 weeks before he died, so he seemed to be a little bit unwell. We had the awful diagnosis that he wasn't going to last more than maybe 3 to 6 months, and in the final couple of days he went downhill rapidly, and he died at home with Mum and I caring for him, and support from the NHS community end-of-life people and the on-call doctors who were absolutely excellent in the last 24 hours. In fact, he was due to go on to the syringe driver, but he didn't live long enough.
And he was a very special man. All dads are, but you are a very close family, aren't you? So there's that to take into account too.
Yes, one thing that I've learned over the last 12 months by talking to people who've also had loss is the closer the relationship, the more painful the loss. And in our case, our family is small, but was extremely close and lived a lot of life together. And with that changing, it's been tougher than I could ever have imagined.
And given the theme of our podcast, which is about coping or going through bereavement at a difficult time like Christmas and New Year, this was your father dying in the October, and then you had the festivities almost straight after. How was that for you?
Hard, and the actual Christmas day, we scarcely mentioned him or my late father-in-law, who all died 5 years previously, so 6 years ago now as well. It was pretty much, in our case, to get through the day, doing reasonably normal things. We really didn't discuss because we didn't want to upset each other. Emotions were still very raw within the family, and I guess my mum, being old school, well in her 80s, openly discussing emotions doesn't come free and easy to the older generation.
And how did you feel about that? Because that was almost pretending nothing had happened.
No, I can't say we were pretending nothing had happened. It was just our way of not diving into the emotions that would have surfaced had we dwelled upon it greatly. Since then, and more time has passed, and there's been more discussion within the family. I mean, my mum misses him every day. She talks to him, even though he's not around. But I do have to remember they were together for 68 years and married for 59. Big numbers that I don't think anybody understands unless you've ever been anywhere close to it. I mean, I obviously haven't even lived that long. So how you can reconcile, comprehend those long time spans, is extremely difficult.
So how will you approach Christmas, New Year this year, 1 year on? Do you think you'll approach it differently?
Yes. I've done a lot of work on grief myself in the last 12 months, having had support from Cornwall Hospice Care, a little bit from Cruise, and some other charities. What I decided to do is, we've just gone past Dad's death anniversary and his birthday, because they are side by side, 23rd and 24th of October. I was conscious that I knew it could be a difficult time, and some people say you need to do whatever you think is best. If necessary, take some time from work so you've got that space. I'd agreed time from work if I needed it, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. Didn't want to sit at home and mope, but I wasn't certain I wanted to be at work either. And about a week, 10 days before the anniversaries were pending, it sort of came to me what I wanted to do. So through my latter primary school years and into my secondary school years, I guess my parents introduced me to coastal walking. I don't know if in the 70s the coastal paths became more available, late 70s, early 80s. Anyway, so I remember walking a lot of Cornish coastal paths, especially here in the west of the county, between Marazion and Land's End and around. So I decided our children were available if they could take a day off. They're in their 20s. And we had a walk from Lamorna to Mosul. It was a pretty rough day. We had every form of weather, wind, rain, lots of mud. And then we had a couple of hours at Tremenier Kitchen, Tremenier Sculpture Gardens, a place that Dad used to like to go and eat. Also, we had his wake. And we just had coffee and cake. And we were also joined by some family friends. They couldn't join us for the walk. So there was 8 of us. And we just sort of marked the time, remembering Dad in that way. So now with Christmas and New Year coming around again, planning that we'll be doing something similar. It's still going to be so different. Because now with 2 grannies, myself and my wife and our 2 grown-up children, there is 6 of us. Where from the time when our children were born 25 or 26 years ago, there was always 8 of us. 4 grandparents, 2 parents and the 2 children. And in that time, we've done every Christmas, every Easter, every family birthday, every Father's Day, every Mother's Day together. Eating out locally or gathering at one of our homes, most likely our home, because when children were small, everything was at hand. And now that family dynamic has been changing. So 6 years ago, father-in-law died. Last year, my dad died. So we're now down to 6. And this is what life is. The only thing you can guarantee in life is change and death.
I know this is probably quite a tough question because you are only 1 year post your dad dying, but would you have any thoughts that you might share with someone who's facing Christmas and New Year, having been bereaved, as someone who's already on that journey, if you like?
If you're not having support from, say, somebody independent, charity, voluntary, then I would really suggest you do so. I've had some good support over the last 12 months that I didn't even know really existed. I knew the hospice existed. It's been used by friends and family. But the walk and talk service I didn't know existed. I was recommended to try walk and talk by somebody I was speaking with at the Cove on Cornwall Hospital site. I like to be out and about. So again, the thought of walking around the coast or something with some people who understand or have been bereaved appealed to me. And I've met some very interesting volunteers, very caring, very sharing, non-judgmental, clearly understand sharing life experience. And every death is different, every relationship is different, but they can sort of normalise this is part of life. And for whatever reason, our society has steered away from embracing or accepting or acknowledging death is there all the time. And as you get older, as I've found, as I'm sure as you've got older you've found, you lose more people more often. And you've sort of got to get into the mind space that this is how life is. I can remember when I was working at Holman's many years ago, one of the older guys in the office, "Where have you been?" "Oh, I've been to so-and-so's funeral." And he seemed to be going to funerals like once a month or more often, because then he was in his 50s and now I'm in my 50s. And I can list ex-work colleagues, friends, even school friends that we've lost along the way, but it's been more so in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years.
Yeah, it's death is a fact of life, but it's a very difficult fact of life, and there is still, even in this modern time, a taboo around the word death and around dying, which that's why folk like you agreeing to chat about it can really help and change people and guide people.
Yes, I can remember some work colleagues, maybe into their 30s, had never been to a funeral. And considering how death is so much part of life, that's almost unbelievable. But again, they would only have gone to a very close family relative. So perhaps they lost grandparents early, or they've had one grandparent particularly live a long time. My own children have unfortunately had to go to funerals of some of their school or college colleagues, sort of in their late teenage years, and it's been very unpleasant for them. And it is unpleasant, but it's part of life that perhaps we shy away from because it's painful. But I found to have benefit from the charity support, you do need to open up to yourself. You've got to admit to yourself how you're feeling, and then to talk in a maybe friendly and comfortable environment to these people you've met from charities, over the phone, over a video call, or best is face to face. I can't be interacting with somebody personally, and tell them how you're feeling, but also have the ability to listen to what they have to say about what you've been telling them, or to listen to their own experiences.
I'd like to thank Darren as well, because it's just so useful for everybody, I think, to hear from someone who is facing bereavement, but also so many points he brought up, like Becky did, that are worth reflecting on. The family dynamic came up again. It's obviously a key part of it.
I think each person in a family plays a pivotal role often, don't they? And that always, I think that struck with me. It's that this year that chair is empty, or there's this space around the table. And that does massively change the dynamic. I think particularly maybe from the older generations, when you've got the grandparents, it's quite a pivotal family role almost, isn't it?
It is.
And also that other theme that came up of you've got to find a way to say it out loud.
Yes, it makes it real, I think. The more often you say it, it makes it real.
And also, I think for people around, for family and friends, it's saying people's names. It's bringing them into the conversation. And I was thinking of so and so today, and they'd be laughing at this. And I think it's introducing them into the festivities as well. It's not about not speaking about people.
Does this all show that actually the worst thing you can do is say nothing?
I think it's really important to maintain those close bonds with the person or persons that you grieve for.
Keeping them alive almost to a sense, isn't it? Keeping that person still within the family.
What you were saying, Ange, about continuing to practice traditions and introduce new rituals, I think that's a really good way of bringing the family together to remember those people, those irreplaceable people. I think that's really important.
I've spoken to people that I've been counselling, who have gone out and done the Christmas tree thing and looked for things, like each of them, children as well, have looked for things that will represent granny or granddad or whoever it is, and they actually find that it's quite a therapeutic thing to do, to go out and find these things, and then they go back and they hang them on the tree, and it brings them into the room, so they're not just the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about because everybody's afraid somebody will get upset, and inevitably somebody will get upset.
So it was interesting, wasn't it, how Darren said last year it was kind of but nobody talked about it. But this year they had done just that, hadn't they? What are we going to do together? And they'd gone and clearly had an amazing walk despite the weather. And that had been, I felt like it had been quite a big turning point for them. Is that the right phrase?
I had one gentleman, elderly gentleman that I'd worked with, and he said something to me, shared something with me that has remained with me. He had lost his wife. They'd been married for many, many years, and he's after he'd been with me for quite a few sessions, he came one day, he said, "Marie, it's become less raw. I know it'll never go away, but I feel now I'm able to talk about it." And I think it is that rawness that people feel in the beginning that is quite often a physical pain as well as an emotional pain. But I think being given a safe space in which to grieve and then to open up when you feel able, it does help that rawness to dissipate.
There was also another theme he brought up, and it's kind of going off the subject of Christmas and New Year, but he was talking about normalising death to make it a part of life. And he talked about your experiences when you're younger and you maybe haven't experienced all of this. I think that begs the question, should we talk about death earlier with our families?
Yes, I think so, definitely. I think, like Darren said, it is a normal part of life, isn't it? And possibly for some, children, maybe the first thing they see of death is when they lose a pet, perhaps. But yeah, I think it's really important to talk about it. I know we do at home now. I think it's become very clinicalised, hasn't it, death in a way, and people don't talk about it because, as Darren said, it was easier not to mention Dad's name because he didn't know what hole that was going to open up, and it was safer to just not talk about it.
How do you do that? Do you think we'll ever get to that point?
I think it is becoming more talked about a little bit, perhaps, but we're still leagues away. When you look back at the Victorians, where death was probably a bit more everywhere, but you had the coffin in the parlour or whatever, and people would come, and
That's right.
it was far more accepted, wasn't it then, I think?
I think we do death better than we did, because I think funerals are now more a celebration of life. And quite often you see funerals where nobody's in black anymore, where it used to be you'd never think of not wearing black at a funeral because that was disrespectful. But actually, I think it's lovely that we celebrate people more, and people do different things, garden parties and all sorts of things that people do. I think that's we're going in the right direction with it, certainly.
So just coming back to the theme of this podcast, which clumsily I've called Bereavement versus Christmas and New Year, let me ask each of you, what would you say to someone who might be listening and facing Christmas and New Year, maybe for the first time or maybe for the time that they realise, maybe this is going to be tough? Marie, what words of wisdom might you have?
I would say listen to what your body's telling you. And if being alone is something that you feel you need, then talk to your family about that. And if that's how you feel, embrace that and take the time to reflect on the person that you loved and the wonderful things that they brought into your life.
Claire?
Tell you, I would completely agree with, and being honest, being able to be honest with the people around you about your feelings and why you're doing something, but also not being afraid, like Ange mentioned earlier, to say the person's name and to fully bring them into the celebrations as well.
And of course you came up with the lovely idea of items you could put on the tree, Ange, but your thoughts?
I think a lot along the lines of Marie, really, that you need to do what's best for you to do. I was talking to a client today, actually, and her and her husband lost a daughter in here. And we were talking about it last Christmas, and she said, we're thinking we might go away, and we were talking about how that would be, and that's what they did. They went away from Christmas, because everywhere you go in the shops is Christmas from October. And so that's what they did, and they walked by the sea, and they took the dog and had meals away, and that's what they did. Whether they do that this Christmas, they might do something different. But for them, that's what they had to do, and I think you have to go with what you feel is right for you and what you can cope with.
Well, thank you, all three of you, as well as thank you to Darren and Becky for being so open and honest about their bereavement, but thank you to the three of you as well. To sum up, are we saying you go with what feels right for you and as just explained to people and do that? Don't be put off by other people saying, but no, this is our tradition. Is that how we're summing this up?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I would say that.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would like to say, just just from this lady that I was talking to, is that the Christmas card thing can be quite difficult for people. And she said, please don't send anybody a Christmas card saying Happy Christmas, because it's not going to be. Just send something that says, I'm thinking of you.
That is a lovely piece of advice and a nice way to end. Thank you very much indeed. Marie Brooks, our counsellor at St Julia's Hospice, Ange Bunt, our counsellor at Mount Edgecombe Hospice, and Clare Bray from our community services team, representing our listening ear service and our walk talk Kerno service. You've been listening to Two Old Choughs, A Tale of Two Hospices, the podcast from Cornwall Hospice Care.